Well, friends, I think it's G.I. Joe time again. So it is DisThunder, and we are here to take a look at the Mezco 112 Collective G.I. Joe Firefly figure. Behind Destro and Storm Shadow and Cobra Commander, I'd say Firefly is probably one of the most recognizable names of the Cobra ranks, probably right up there with like Zartan and Major Blood, even though he doesn't really carry the rank that those guys do. He made his first appearance in 1984 as part of that year's assortment. He also does, of course, appear in the Sunbow cartoon, where he shares a voice actor with Grimlock, and whenever you can claim Grimlock as part of your lineage, you're not in a bad spot. His actual name and origin are a mystery in just about every continuity. Only really the movies do we know his face, because it was the late, great Ray Stevenson that played him in Retaliation, I think it was. In that version, he was previously a G.I. Joe, but in most versions, he is a previous ninja student who then went on to become a saboteur and an assassin. In the comics, he was actually taken in by the Koga clan as a result of a debt that his father had incurred. But in most cases, his ninja skills serve as a second place to his saboteur, assassin, explosive skills, which is what we know him best for. Actually, in the comics, it's one of the more infamous things that he's known for is he approached Zartan at one point in an attempt to kill Snake Eyes, and Zartan accidentally kills Hardmaster, which leads to Storm Shadow being blamed for the death of the Arashikage leader, and that's how he was dishonored and branded as traitor among their ranks. So, nice work, dude. His file card makes reference of the fact that he is a ninja master, saboteur, and an expert in all NATO and Warsaw Pact explosives and detonators, which has got to be one hell of a skill. He always places his charges in the proper location for maximum damage, and he has his fees paid to a Swiss bank account, and they're always paid in advance. He makes no guarantees, and he gives no refunds. When you need something destroyed, accept no substitutes. I want to start by taking a little closer look at the detailing of his costume, in particular his camouflage coveralls that are done up in that badass tricolor urban camo scheme that was all the rage in the 80s and 90s. I mean, if you ever picked up a Soldier of Fortune magazine, you would see this shit everywhere, and it's not hard to see why. It still looks cool as hell. His uniform basically comprises of a pair of camouflage coveralls over a gray turtleneck, and then the vest and the backpack and the belts and so on go over the top of that. Removing the backpack, which is actually pretty easy to do. You've got just two fasteners, one on each side here. Just unclip those and you're good to go. Makes for a nice, well-contained little unit for his drones. We'll talk about those in a minute. With that off, though, you can see that his plate carrier is a soft cloth material, which means it really doesn't phase the articulation. We've got the double-jointed ball neck at the top, as you would anticipate. There's a lot of clothing right there, so it doesn't have quite the range. Well, the range is there. The clothing is just impeding it somewhat. The coveralls are not much trouble. You can see there is a little bit of butterfly tilt there. Great double-jointed elbow. Pretty decent range outward on the shoulder. We actually get a little better than that. That's about where the seam starts to pull. And he actually has flesh-toned forearms, just in case you want to roll up his sleeves for whatever reason. Same ball joint wrists as usual. As you can see, the vest is not really causing much trouble as far as ranging him back and forward. And that also goes for his thigh drops off of his belt. They really don't seem to bother him much, especially just going forward and back. Decent little double-jointed knee and some really solid new ankles that feel better than Snake Eyes' did by a fair margin. And the drops don't really hinder outward motion much either. You can see they snap just into the belt. You can remove a couple patches and plug them in so you can set up his loadout as you see fit, which is always a nice feature of any figure, really. Going through his head sculpts, they are subtle, but there are some definite differences to them. This is probably the standard, I would say, where he's got just kind of a neutral, pissed-off standard Firefly expression. The next one has a raised eyebrow and an almost more comical look, definitely more expressive. This is kind of my go-to just because it makes him unique among what I hope will be a sea of guys in balaclavas sometime soon. And the last one is more of a Clint Eastwood-esque squint. You can just see that the pupils are more narrow and he's more scrunched up and a little more furrowed brow. Normally, I would say you could probably forego one of these in favor of an unmasked head, but that's kind of hard to do in Firefly's case. And then, of course, any of the three heads can equip his night vision goggles that are on an elastic and just slide right over the top of his head or right on his forehead in that all-too-cool operator style. Moving into the accessories, we'll just kind of go through them briefly because there's a lot to choose from here. Got a couple of throwing knives that fit into his sheaths that can fit on either his forearms or wherever else you want to put them. They're on elastics as well. These little blue dialed guys, I think, are remote detonators. He's got 2 on a thigh drop and then 2 loose ones. Got a couple pineapple grenades, a couple smoke grenades, probably some phosphorus would be my guess for the other 2, as well as TNT packs with digital readouts on them, and a pretty cool old school cell phone looking remote detonator. In his weapons, we've got a slightly larger boot knife that goes in a sheath that would obviously fit on his boot, as well as a sort of FN style, I'd say 9mm sidearm, and I'd probably also say that his rifle is probably more of a pistol caliber carbine style. Has a nice telescoping stock on it and a removable suppressor. Can't say I recognize either of these as having a direct real-world parallel, but the machine gun in particular looks a lot like a lot of AR-style 9mm subguns you'll see out there, so that makes sense to me. And of course, lest we forget, the magazine is also removable, which is a feature that I am glad has made a firm comeback in the G.I. Joe line. One of my only complaints is more just how these guys all work together, and that is where it's kind of difficult to get him to properly shoulder that rifle. He has a bit of a tendency to chicken wing it. But beyond that, the detonators and the bombs and the remotes and all that stuff are just too damn cool. And they set themselves up for all kinds of interesting setups, having Firefly blow up all that expensive G.I. Joe classified vehicle shit we've been buying lately. But if your taste for mayhem skew a little more modern, he comes equipped with 3 drones that store very neatly in that backpack we were talking about. I like how these are slightly smaller than the classified versions. They feel stealthier. And there's not a whole lot to them. I mean, you've got moving rotors on the flying drones and rotating wheels on the ground drone. But I think they're pretty awesome for what they are, and they actually feel like they're of substance. They're not just a piece of molded plastic. Doesn't hurt that he comes with a couple of really cool effects where you can have them flying off of the backpack, and then pairing it with his tablet-style drone controller is very 2020-esque, and I think it looks pretty kick-ass. Let's swing back around and do some size comparisons right quick here. And as the 5th Joe in the subline, he is also the 5th unique body for said subline. As you can see next to Storm Shadow, he is slightly taller and a little wider, different shoulders, presumably different chest, and so on. Like I said, I don't think if there's any reuse in it at all, it's very minimal. I would count this as a new body as well. And here we have him next to Roadblock, who I just realized is stepped slightly forward, so he doesn't look as much taller as he actually is. But yes, he is taller than Firefly, and obviously bigger still, with bigger arms, shoulders, and bigger chest. I've heard people say they think that Roadblock is too small, but I think it's just he's kind of deceptive. Once you actually have him lined up with a figure, you realize he's about, in scale terms, he's probably another 3 or 4 inches taller and a good 20 pounds heavier than most of the other characters we have thus far. And here is our Cobra lineup, at least for now. Once again, he is about the same height as Destro, although, again, not as broad. So they're all just slightly different enough. And I know people think the head sculpts for these figures are too big, and I kind of get what you're saying, maybe that 10-15% reduction would make them look more heroically proportioned, but when I see all of them together like this, I think the head sculpt size is fine. I don't really have a problem with it. The other thing to take into account is a lot of these characters, obviously, of the 5, 4 of them are wearing masks, so they should be slightly larger than a standard head without, a balaclava or a chrome helmet on are. That just makes sense. And then lastly, here he is with Supreme Knight Batman, where again we can kind of demonstrate the differences in body sculpts, where Batman obviously has the much more cut and dry superhero proportions, whereas Firefly has actually, in my opinion, some kind of real-world soldier proportions, which is why, spoiler alert, before we get to the part where I tell you where you should buy this figure, I think he's quite possibly the best 6-inch military figure I've seen so far. As we're sort of winding down and wrapping up here, I realized I didn't touch on his sweet little wrist-mounted communicator / PDA thingy. And can I just tell you, as far as a feature on an action figure goes, this is one of the things that I love. I am tickled by these things. I'm tempted to steal one from another Firefly and glue it on a Batman gauntlet. I love the little pop-up communicators and stuff like that. And it's also worth mentioning, you take those dynamite sticks and put a little blue tack on the back, and you can slap those bad boys on anything you want to blow up. In Minecraft, of course. So, yeah, obviously, I'm going to recommend you pick up this Firefly figure, especially in a year where it feels like G.I. Joe is really starting to heat up again. And I feel like I'm going to be spending a lot of money on a lot of Joe stuff, and I'm okay with that. And really, I think most of us are okay with that. The only problem you're going to run into with Firefly, at least in my opinion, is he has that almost perfect army builder quality outside of G.I. Joe. In G.I. Joe, he's a specialist and he's a saboteur and he's very quickly recognizable. But if you were to take him and drop him into, Counter-Strike or Splinter Cell or Modern Warfare, he looks like any other Special Forces soldier or mercenary done up in some urban camo. Obviously, I am also tempted to do so, but at the same time, there's a lot of stuff coming out this year, so I'm trying to pace myself at least a little bit. So if you're looking to get one, Mezco Toys is waitlist as I'm recording this, and I think Big Bad Toy Store, where I got my second figure, I think they may have just gone to waitlist as well. So bad news, everyone. But it's worth pointing out, recently I had a Roadblock convert from the waitlist. I wanted a second one of those. And I think I saw Destro pop up on Amazon, if I'm not mistaken. So some of these figures are coming out in limited quantities. Again, where that's coming from, I'm not going to pretend to know. But it's worth keeping your eye out if you missed out on him, because we may see a sort of restock in the coming months, especially as more Joe figures come out. Anyway, I think that's about enough out of me for one review. So, as always, thanks to Mezco Toys for helping me get another excellent figure to add to the collection. And thanks to you guys for coming through to watch the review. And you will see me again very soon with some turtle stuff. Take care.